Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the University of Buffalo's Graduate School of Education Alumni Association special event. The event this evening is titled A Conversation with New York State Commissioner of Education, Dr. Betty Rosa. My name is John McKenna, and I am the president of the University of Buffalo Graduate School of Education Alumni Association, and I'll be the host of the program this evening. Our agenda is simple. We'll have opening remarks from Dean Rosenblatt. The introduction of the commissioner will be done by myself. We'll then proceed to our virtual fireside chat with the commissioner that will be facilitated by myself. The questions for the fireside chat were developed by the Graduate School of Education, the Graduate School of Education Alumni Association, and the Commissioner's Office. After the virtual fireside chat, we'll proceed to our questions from our constituents. We canvassed everyone during the registration process and have collected those questions. The questions have been consolidated to eliminate redundancies and fit within our time frame. Dr. Doug Regan and Dr. Walt Polka of our Alumni Association will facilitate the constituent question portion of the program. You can also write a question in the chat during the program, and we'll try to get to them if time permits. Please direct your questions to either Dr. Regan or Dr. Polka. At approximately 7 o'clock, we'll conclude the question portion of the program and move to our awards presentation. The Graduate School of Education Alumni Association will be presenting our Honorary Lifetime Achievement Award to Commissioner Rosa for her outstanding service to our profession at the conclusion of our program this evening. Without further ado, we'll begin our program. I am pleased to introduce the outstanding Dean of our Graduate School of Education for our opening remarks. Please welcome Dean Suzanne Rosenblatt.
Thank you, John. Good evening. On behalf of the Graduate School of Education, welcome to tonight's conversation with the New York State Commissioner of Education, Dr. Betty Rosa. During her tenure, Commissioner Rosa has proven herself to be a true champion of equity, leading the way and supporting efforts to remove barriers to access university-based teacher preparation programs. And for this, I am especially grateful. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the GSE staff who so capably assisted the Alumni Board in putting this program together. Lauren Turner, Catherine Ross-Winnie, Amber Winters, and Chandra Murphy. I am really pleased to see such a strong turnout this evening. This is a testament to the fact that so many of us, for personal and or professional reasons, are deeply concerned about many issues confronting P20 education today. I look forward to the exchange this evening and trust it will be generative. Finally, I would like to acknowledge and thank the GSE Alumni Association Board for their continued support of the Graduate School of Education and for hosting tonight's event. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. John McKenna, Associate Superintendent of Williamsville Schools and the President of the GSE Alumni Association Board, who will formally introduce Commissioner Rosa. John?
Thank you very much, Dean Rosenblatt. It is my pleasure this evening. It is my honor and privilege to introduce our special guest this evening, Dr. Betty A. Rosa. Dr. Rosa is the Commissioner of Education and President of the University of the State of New York. The Board of Regents unanimously appointed Dr. Rosa as permanent commissioner, the first Latina woman to serve in the position, on February 8th, 2021. Prior to serving as commissioner and interim commissioner, she served as the chancellor and member of the Board of Regents. Dr. Rosa was elected by her Board of Regents colleagues as chancellor in March 2016 and re-elected for a second term in 2019. Dr. Rosa is a nationally recognized education leader and received her master's and doctoral degrees in administration, planning, and social policy from Harvard University. She also holds 2 other masters of science and education degrees, one in administration and supervision, and the other in bilingual education from the City College of New York and Lehman College, respectively, and a BA in psychology from the City College of New York. She has more than 30 years of instructional and administrative experience with an expertise in inclusive education, cooperative teaching models, student achievement, and policy implementation. Dr. Rosa began her career in the New York City Department of Education as a bilingual paraprofessional, teacher, and reading coordinator She also served as an assistant principal and principal in special education. She introduced an integrated linguistic model in developing a multilingual and multicultural school for general and special education populations. She was principal of IS 218, a full-service community school in partnership with the Children's Aid Society in District 6, and developed and implemented the Office of Conflict Resolution for the New York City Division of Special Education. In 1998, Dr. Rosa was appointed to the position of Superintendent of Community School District 8 in the Bronx, and later appointed to serve as the Senior Superintendent of the Bronx. One of the schools Dr. Rosa founded as Superintendent, MS 101, Maritime Academy for Science and Technology, became the top-ranked middle school in the city of New York based on New York State assessment results. Since 2015, Dr. Rosa has been honored with several prestigious awards, including the Champion of Education Leadership Award from the Alliance for Quality Education, the Woman of the Year Award from the New York League of Puerto Rican Women, a Heimlich Community Service Award from the Ben Franklin Reformed Democratic Club, the Transformative Education Leadership Award from the International Chartership High School, the Education Leadership Award from the National Puerto Rican Day Parade, the Leadership and Education Award from the Association of Dominican American Supervisors and Administrators, the Woman of Distinction Award from the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, and the Latina of the Year Award from the New York State Assembly and Senate's Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force. She has made countless contributions to our profession and society. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Betty Rosa. We'll give her a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Rosa.
Thank you.
We are so pleased to have you with us this evening. And when I put that introduction together, is actually a condensed version of what was online. So you have had an incredible, illustrious career. And that leads us to our first question. You have had an amazing career with significant accomplishments. What are you most proud of and why?
Support and develop what we would call a culture of looking at service, being service oriented. I think all of us, superintendents, teachers, principals, community, we really became first responders in terms of education and providing ways for our communities to stay both mentally healthy, because we saw the disconnect. We saw the issues that our children were in isolation and dealing with. And at the same time, we were trying to respond in ways to alleviate, but at the same time, continue to do our work as educators. So during that period of time, we came together and we realized that the department had to stand with the public, with the field, both in terms of both looking at a health crisis, but also a mental health crisis, and also how do we maintain and continue the work of educating our young people. And so my partner in this process, obviously somebody who's been in BOCES and has been in higher ed, has been Jim Baldwin, who has really created, and it continues to work on creating a P20 structure to not only inform so that higher ed, obviously in good customer service, responds to the needs of our P12 world, but also creating those intersections so that the practice of P12 informs higher ed, and higher ed informs obviously the work of our P12 world. Jim?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think in response to the pandemic, what we have tried to do and what we've done as a department is to, first of all, and it may sound a little strange, but celebrate what has been done and what has been accomplished during probably the most challenging period of time that anyone who's currently in public education has experienced, certainly in New York State. When we consider what our educational leaders have accomplished, what our teachers have accomplished in terms of responding to the pandemic, pretty much turning things around on a dime when we go back 2 years ago to that March, figuring out how they were going to get our students as connected as they could be. And in some cases, that was relatively easy because the infrastructure existed. In other cases, it was a daily labor where packets were delivered to students' homes, where food was delivered to students' homes. So the first thing we have encouraged our school districts to do is to celebrate what was accomplished and really to give people a pat on the back and a well-deserved thank you for what was done. The other thing, we reminded people when we were opening school this year that we are the stewards of this system, that we take care of people's children, and that we have adults in our school communities and children in our school communities, some of whom have suffered very directly from the pandemic, some of whom suffered indirectly. We need to acknowledge that. We encouraged our school districts to acknowledge what the teachers were going through, what the adults in the system were going through, and what the students were going through. I recently read an article that there were some 200,000 children in the United States who lost a parent to COVID. So the toll there was significant. And when we brought our children back to school, I know that many situations where individual principals and superintendents and teachers acknowledged those losses and helped their students to move on. We made significant investments in terms of social emotional learning resources through the department. And we also advocated at the state level for resources to be provided to assist schools with the mental health challenges that were there, but became very obvious during the course of the pandemic. And as we brought our children back to school, there's roughly about $100 million provided in the state budget, $50 million each year for the next 2 years that will be made available to schools and to school districts to help them deal with many of these issues. And that's in addition to the federal funds that were provided. The commissioner mentioned the P20, and I think what we have to do is sort of reflect on the experience. And in reflecting on the experience, we recognize that there were many challenges that school districts were facing and that our institutions of higher ed are facing. And what we look to do is to create common ground around issues related to teacher certification and around other issues where the P12 system and the higher ed system intersect. And we talk a little bit more a bit later in this conversation about some of the initiatives that we've undertaken in that regard.
Thank you so much, Jim and Betty, for your service-oriented approach and for making mental health a priority. I know I speak for thousands of educators.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for that. Our next question. State assessments have certainly looked different over the past couple of years because of the pandemic. Where do you see those going in the future?
Sure. So first of all, pre-pandemic, if you recall, we started down the road of looking at, I sometimes smile because I remember writing an article on the Onboard to talk about how we really needed to revisit what a diploma from New York State meant, number one. also the idea that we really wanted to try to create opportunities to engage communities of educators, parents, and others to really have input into our graduation measures. And so that article led to the grad measures movement. And if you recall, we were already down the road during that period of time, really engaging all over the state, physically going in and engaging with parents, with teachers, with principals, with different businesses, different stakeholders, and having the kinds of conversations about the whole idea of looking at a quality education, looking at what are the ingredients to prepare our students, both in civic education, civic learning, financial literacy, issues that were really specific to our need to reinvent, reinvite, rebuild, reassess, all of the above through our grad measures process. And then the pandemic hit, as you know. It didn't stop us. It did, obviously, we've had to reassess the timeline, but we have not stopped, even during that period of time, thinking about the whole notion of looking at graduation and looking at our whole process. And so, as you know, grad measures is one of those key priorities for both the board and the department, and looking at multiple pathways, multiple ways, looking at college and career, not college or, but college and what are the key factors of preparing our students to be successful in the choices that they make, to know that they're truly prepared to really engage both in higher ed as well as the workplace. And so at the same time, we were also engaging, as you know, in the whole, civic learning, civic readiness. We added that to our design. And so all of that, the composite of looking at the various key elements of what our students needed was really a key point in, and continues to be. And we engage even during these challenging times in looking at ways of having those conversations, student conversations, conversations with higher ed, conversations with business communities. So all of that has really helped us to really reshape the notion of assessment, but more importantly, teaching and learning, the quality of the individuals and the preparation they receive to really deliver on the promise for our students.
Well, thank you. That is a refreshing perspective, and to look at the whole child and to look at the whole process instead of just one specific test. Fantastic. Thank you. I know, again, I know a lot of our educators out there would agree wholeheartedly with that approach, and thank you very much for pursuing it. The next question. In your time as commissioner, you have made some structural changes at the department to improve customer service and develop a P20 continuum. Can you tell us about those initiatives?
Well, those are the initiatives that obviously Jim was speaking about. And again, so let me frame it in terms of the pillars that we truly believe in. And I have to say that we started out, with a couple of key points. One is we truly believe, similar to Pablo Picasso, there is only one way to see things until someone shows us how to look at them with different eyes, right? And so with that concept, we have a team that has come together and again, to look at the structures of the department, to look at P20, to look at what anchors us. What are the kinds of things that we have to do? And under the leadership of Dr. Baldwin, we have really started to engage in those deep conversations, not only with our stakeholders, our superintendents, but really putting in place in our Board of Regents, the structures that are going to support that. So he's going to talk briefly about the Office of Teacher and Leader Development, which I know he's very excited about. And some of the others, the performance-based network, our Carnegie Grant pilot, and we'll take it from there. Jim?
Sure, thank you, Commissioner. I think that when we have looked at the structure of the department, what we saw was an agency that reinforced some of the separation between P12 and higher ed that we were looking to eliminate, if you will. We're like many organizations, we are siloed. We're hopefully a bit less siloed than we used to be, and hopefully moving in the right direction. There are two strands that we've identified. The first is the teacher leader strand. When we think about P20, what do we have in common? We have in common the fact that we need teachers, we need school leaders. The higher educational system helps us obtain those teachers and leaders. We have a certification system, and then we have schools that employ the folks who are produced through that system. What we haven't had is an office that focuses on that continuum and that highlights the fact that we need to be supporting our teacher prep and our leader prep programs. We need for those programs to be closely connected to our certification work. We need to improve and update the teach system that has served us well up until the last few years and is now really based on old technology that needs to be replaced. And then we need to be thinking about the responsibility of the school district or the school employer for the development and the continued development of teachers. So we are in the process of creating an Office of Teacher Leader Development that'll create that focus and really bring to the policy deliberations of the Board of Regents and to the considerations of the department, the institutions of higher education, and our school districts that focus on teachers and school leaders. We know that we're facing shortages of teachers. We're already experiencing that.
Mm-hmm.
We are committed to working with the teacher prep programs, our school districts, and other stakeholders in a review of the certification system to see what adjustments can we make to ensure rigor, to ensure quality, but to ensure affordability and availability of teachers and leaders for our schools over the next generation. When we consider the student strand, we're looking, as the commissioner mentioned, we have the grad measures work going on. We had a terrific session that involved representatives of higher ed in that conversation about what the currency of a Regents diploma ought to be, and with how we can measure competence and mastery in terms of the state learning standards. That discussion and many like it are informing the work of the grad measures group and will ultimately be provided in the form of a report to a blue ribbon commission that the Board of Regents will convene to ultimately make recommendations in terms of grad measures and also in terms of the kinds of assessments that schools will be able to use to identify whether or not students have learned what they need to learn in order to earn that high school diploma. That brings us to a whole conversation about where we are with assessments. We've been funded $500,000 from the Carnegie Foundation to study the feasibility of using performance-based assessments at a scalable level. And that work is running somewhat parallel to the grad measures work and will inform the grad measures work as it proceeds. That work includes a P20 perspective, folks from our P12 schools, and many individuals from higher ed. We also have every 8 years, the state law requires that there be a planning study looking at higher education in New York State. Traditionally, the group that does that has only been representative of the 4 sectors of higher education in the state. As we are putting that advisory group together, we are going to include those 4 sectors and certainly representation from those 4 sectors, but we're also bringing in representatives of the business community, and we're bringing in representatives of the P12 community and other stakeholders in the higher ed enterprise so that we get a better rounded view of what the plan should be for higher ed going forward.
Well, thank you very much for your courageous leadership in those issues and for taking on the big issues that needed to be addressed. Again, I know I speak for thousands of educators to say thank you for taking on, these are big issues, and we truly appreciate that you're taking them head on. Thank you very much.
Well, we're very fortunate, I will say, we're very fortunate to have a commissioner who has no shortage of courage and who is willing to take on the issues that need to be taken on. So while we have that, we're going to take advantage of it.
Well, thank you. We do appreciate it. The 6th question, this is our final question for the fireside chat portion of this. And I know you touched on some of this a little bit in the past answers, but maybe elaborate a little more. Districts across the state are facing a shortage of teachers and administrators. What is being done at the state level to address these shortages?
Okay, so again, I'll start, and this is the one issue that had started even before the pandemic. I think part of it is grounded in the fact that our profession, in many ways, is a profession that really creates so many ways of connecting individuals, but in many ways, sometimes the salaries, as you know, sometimes the opportunities, the expenses of even in many cases, higher education are very, very challenging, particularly for certain individuals in certain communities, right? So what we're trying to do in, as you know, even through My Brother's Keeper, which you know is funded, and we're trying to grow. And this kind of goes back to a combination of the DEI, the diversity, right? The equity issues, looking at how do we support individuals who really want to be part of this profession. And to Jim's point, when he talked about the flexibility, right? Instead of making it very challenging, making it so that we're partners in a process that allow, really that allow individuals to get engaged and excited about the fact that this is just one of the most amazing professions anybody could be a part of, to touch children's lives and to make such a difference. And so we have been both engaged from a practical level, creating opportunities for growing the pipeline by having identify individuals early on. I'm a person who, even though I had my bachelor's degree, I was not in the teaching profession. I was on my way to law school, but you know, I wanted to be a paraprofessional, learn about education so that I could, in fact, have funds that would support my master's degree. Instead, I fell in love with a profession that really distracted me on my way to law school, and forever grateful that I truly fell in love with this profession. So I think exposing young people early on, creating opportunities for mentorships, creating opportunities for celebrating the profession as an incredible profession, and then doing some of the stuff that I know Jim and his team are doing, working with various stakeholders to not only support, identify, mentor, create opportunities to make even student teaching a lot easier, and really draw on different ways of bringing other talents into the profession, rather than just having one path, but having multiple ways to increase, obviously, the interest, and increase the opportunities, and increase the ways that we can think about teaching and learning with, you know, with a critical eye on knowing that we have to address the shortages and address the need to bring additional individuals into the profession. I know Jim has been working with NYSIT. He's been working, you know, obviously with the, you know, My Brother's Keeper, with other, particularly bringing an awareness of communities of color to try to really create an interest, a pipeline, a way of diversifying our communities and our schools.
So I think this is one of those situations where the pandemic really dramatized the issues that we're facing when it comes to the teaching profession and the school leader profession. We have heard from school districts, school superintendents, personnel folks in school districts, that in some situations we have the illusion of a certification system because we've made it too difficult to get certified. We have too many school districts in a situation where they're putting uncertified or inappropriately certified individuals in front of students. So, you know, it's really forced us to take a look at what have we done over the last 15 years or so. And like any institution, we all know that there is this accretion of things over time. And when we look at the certification system, it is comprised of multiple layers that are sometimes very difficult to understand. If a person aspires to teaching, you know, they can go to our website, take a look. They may or may not understand exactly what they have to go through in order to get there. We have individuals in schools, we have individuals in BOCES who have the same experience. We have created an incredibly complex system. It has become very expensive to become a teacher. And we know what starting salaries tend to be in a state where, you know, we have collective bargaining, we have very active labor movement. When people look at the prospect of incurring significant debt, and then they look at starting salaries, it gets them thinking about other professions, even though they may have, it may be their great ambition to become a teacher. So we need to really start dealing with these issues and deal with them with our partners in higher education and with our partners in the P-12 system. The other thing is this: we have tried, and the commissioner and the Board of Regents has focused us on improving customer service. So our customers are those school districts that are trying to employ teachers. Our customers are those higher ed institutions that are preparing teachers. What we have been doing is working with them to identify where we thought there was what I'll call low-hanging fruit in terms of the certification, obstacles to certification. We've already enacted regulations that repeal the EdTPA, which was creating obstacles for people to become certified, and never, 10 years in, never fully implemented because of the logistical issues and concerns associated with the administration of the EdTPA. We've looked at some of the general core requirements where we had redundant requirements, and we've addressed that. We've looked at some of the internal sort of unwritten rules that evolved over time. Every organization adopts strategies and tactics that accrue. We began to question the staff. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why do we do it this way? Why do we expect people to do this? What we discovered was that over time, a lot of those tactics had developed, a lot of sort of policies and practices developed that were really creating obstacles to certification for individuals. Part of it is changing the culture. Rather than looking at the department as creating barriers to certification, we want the people who are working in the Office of Teaching Initiatives to take a customer service approach. When people have met the requirements for certification, we expect that they will be certified and that they will be certified as quickly as that can happen. We have sought resources to invest in the technology systems that support the Office of Teaching Initiatives. We didn't, this is a very interesting situation. A number of years back, certification fees were increased with the idea that the funds would go into a special revenue fund that would be available to the department to continually improve the Office of Teaching Initiatives and the technology in the TEACH system. What happened over time is that that money was not made available to the department. This year, we requested that that $8 million that's in that fund be made available to the department. We had about $1.5 million made available to us to begin the process of investing in the technology that's going to be necessary to create a portal where applicants, where teacher aspirants are going to be able to interact in a real-time way with the certification system. So those are both, the sort of practical issues surrounding teacher certification. We have proposed a change in the literacy certification. We'll propose very shortly some changes in the special ed certification area to respond to the pleas of our K-12 school districts that something needs to be done in order for them to have a ready pool of appropriately certified teachers available to them.
Excellent. And increased in opportunities, taking away obstacles, multiple pathways to certification, utilizing a customer service approach. Excellent. I can tell you that I know all the school districts and colleges and universities across our state will be happy to work with you on that too. Those are absolutely great suggestions. And thank you very much for sharing your insight.
Let me just mention one more thing, the Teacher Opportunity Corps.
Absolutely.
We are increasing funding for the Teacher Opportunity Corps out of the My Brother's Keeper program in the coming year. And we will be looking for additional higher ed partners to support that effort.
Well, thank you. We'll definitely look into that without a doubt. Thank you, Jim. I know now, I want to thank you very much. That concludes the fireside chat portion of our program this evening. And now what I'd like to do is we have questions from our constituents that we'd like to ask you. We canvassed our University Graduate School of Education Alumni Association, and we have some questions that we'd like to ask you from our group. And this is where we have Dr. Doug Regan and Dr. Walt Polka. I'm going to turn it over to you. And I think Dr. Regan you're going to ask the first question today.
Thanks so much, John. It really is a true pleasure to be with you, Dr. Rosa, Dr. Baldwin. Your collegial approach to education is both refreshing and, more importantly, effective. Thank you for changing the culture. My first constituent question, and you have bumped into this a bit already, but perhaps you can elaborate. Has there been a shift in the educational policy since the onset of the pandemic to better account for the needs of students, especially those of Indigenous minority communities? If so, in what way has the policy shifted, and how, in fact, would such a policy shift better assist and prepare for the needs of students should a future pandemic occur?
Well, okay, so I'm going to start, first of all, one of the things that has been very, very important to us, it's a major shift for us was for those that noticed when we had to deal with the mask issue, we really did it together with the Department of Health. We developed the guidance with the support of our superintendents, principals, and other stakeholders, but it was the work that we did together with Commissioner Bassett in realizing that we had we were dealing with a health crisis and a health issue, and the cross-agency work was so important, and having the giving voice to two agencies working together collaboratively and sending one message to the field. We sent one letter signed by both of us, was one example of the cross-agency work that we are doing with this department with other agencies. And I think the message that we wanted to send is that all the agencies in this state must work together, whether it's the Department of Health, in this case, the Department of Mental Health, to the Department of Justice, to really create one voice with one mission to support our young people, to support our young people being successful in the communities. And so we're really, really proud of that. But I think, to go back to where we started, the issue of diversity, DEI, drives all of our work around, as we talked about, the issue of social justice, right? The issue of voice, representation, being included, being at the table, knowing that it is so important to have a diverse workforce, to have a representation. As most of you know, how many times we hear sometimes students talk about, I didn't have a teacher that looked like me, or I didn't have somebody that could relate to my culture and my language. And while those things may sometimes, in my opinion, be add-ons, they shouldn't be. They should be core and center. They should be part of the solution. They should really not be obstacles or barriers, but rather opportunities to really enrich and enhance the lives of all the students in this state.
Thank you, Commissioner. Your collegial approach is shining through. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to Dr. Polka.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reagan. And again, I appreciate your work, Dr. Rosa and Dr. Baldwin, and your refreshing visionary leadership for our state. And again, based on your comments of today, it's been refreshing and appropriate. My first question from the constituents is, the pandemic had desperate impact on students' well-being and learning among different social, racial, ethnic groups, with more adverse impact on learning and well-being losses among disadvantaged minority students. What are the New York State Education Department's policy priorities and intervention strategies for the post-pandemic recovery? And how long do you think it will take to fully recover from the educational losses that we've experienced and get back on track?
Well, I think the how long is a very tough question to answer, because it all depends on some communities, as you know, stayed open even during the pandemic with some what I would call some disruptions, but minor disruptions. The pandemic, as Jim had alluded to, had an unevenness about the ability from infrastructure to equipment to even families that had experienced a larger portion of losses. We had families that young people had to go to work to continue to support families, as you know. We had situations that our young people were traumatized and feeling the sense of disconnect and isolation, where in other families, there were support systems in place to, while everyone was feeling the pain. Obviously, we know there were some communities that had greater pain. So when you ask the question about, losses, that definition impacted, obviously, we know, communities of color much greater than any other community. And part of it, we had communities, we had individual families that could financially afford to move to other places, to relocate, to find other ways to compensate for the tragedy of the pandemic, to find ways of really providing their children and their families with other types of opportunity to support, the well-being, the wellness, if you will, while other families were absolutely devastated, had stress, trauma, and were impacted, as I already said, by losses left and right due to poor health, medical conditions, underlying conditions. And so it was very hard for some communities and families to concentrate and continue the teaching and learning, and continue the learning aspect when in fact they were seeing their loved ones. They couldn't even say goodbye in some cases to their loved ones. So we've gone through a major, I would say, a major situation with different levels, and again, the unevenness, so that it is really one of those situations that in some communities, in some families, the impact was, I would say, an impact versus a major impact in other communities. And so I think our funding, as you know, through ARP, the federal funding and the state funding, we hope to use these funds to really, really try to support the needs that our students have, or the gaps that our students currently have, in order to create the healing that I think all of our communities need, but in particular, those that were the most marginalized.
Thank you.
I think I would say that the DEI initiative, to me, has great power in terms of addressing this issue, because what the Board of Regents and the Commissioner have called upon our school districts to do is to review and reflect on their policies, their strategies, and their tactics locally, while the Board of Regents and the Commissioner are focused on DEI on a statewide level. The foundation aid formula is being fully implemented, and we're correctly celebrating that. But what we need to understand, and the board understands this, and the commissioner has advocated for a review of the foundation aid formula to update it so that it reflects issues of equity. And those issues exist in, we think of equity, sometimes we only think about our urban centers. We know, having traveled to different school districts around the state, equity is an issue in urban schools, it's an issue in rural schools, it's an issue in some suburban schools. So that need to update the foundation aid formula is very much on the forefront and on the front burner in terms of education policy. And I think when we see the manifestations of that, you mentioned indigenous populations. For years, the department has been advocating that additional resources be provided to those schools that serve the Native American community in New York. This year, with the leadership of the commissioner and the Board of Regents, there is a very significant, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of $36 million that is going to be invested in those schools after years and years of neglect. So the power of raising the consciousness about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think we're already seeing results. And I think we'll see more results as the state wrestles with some of the issues that are on the front burner as we look out into the future.
Thank you.
And before, okay, so only because as you asked the question, I was thinking we have on the lighter side, we have a statement that we use with our DEI with diversity is being invited to the dance. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Equity is allowing you to choose the music. So just wanted
Very
to share that.
Thank you.
John, I think it's back to you, John.
I thought we were going to do one more question with Doug, or were we going to do one more with Doug, or did we come to the end of our time already? Oh, well, I guess we have come to the end of our time. Boy, that went way too quick. But thank you so much, Commissioner Rosa. We really appreciate you spending this time with us to see. And we got to do it again now because this just went by way too fast. And Senior Deputy Commissioner, Jim Baldwin, thank you so much. Also, his insight, wisdom, both of you really shared a lot of great information with us this evening. And tonight, we want to give you a very special award before we conclude our presentation today, Commissioner Rosa. And this is for you. It's a very special, it's our most prestigious award that we give for our Alumni Association. It is the Honorary Lifetime Achievement Award because we truly appreciate all that you have done. We appreciate your courage and all the initiatives that you have done and that you are doing. So this award says that the Honorary Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Dr. Betty A. Rosa, New York State Commissioner of Education, for extraordinary service, outstanding leadership, and exemplary contributions to the education profession. Presented by the University of Buffalo Graduate School of Education Alumni Association, April 26, 2022. I wish you were here to get it. You'll just have to stop by. We cordially invite you to come back to pick this up. And we just, again, I know maybe Dean Rosenblith, you want to say a couple of quick things here at the end too, but we just truly appreciate all that you have done to help our state. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, John. Dr. Rosa, thank you for this really engaging conversation tonight. Despite everything that's happened in the last 2+ years, I am actually feeling very hopeful. And as I said in my opening remarks, I've seen this movement and the recognition that if we're really serious about issues of equity, we have to think about barriers to entering the profession. And I think I've only been in New York State for 5 years, but thank you, because I haven't seen this kind of movement in the 5 years that I've been here until very recently. So I'm really hopeful for our future that we can meet all of our goals in productive and in ways that really benefit the students in the state. So thank you.
I know before we go, I just want to say, thank you to everybody who was able to join us here this evening. We really appreciate it. A couple of announcements just for the good of our university. June 1st through the 5th, we want to come and join us for Alumni Week. And today is a very special day at University of Buffalo. It's a giving day. So I want to remind everybody to please make sure that you participate in our Giving Day celebration here today. And on behalf of all of us at UB, one last thank you to Commissioner Rosa and Senior Deputy Commissioner Baldwin. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. And I don't know if you can hear, we've got a lot of people who are virtually watching. We'll give you a virtual round of applause. Hopefully you can hear it all the way in Albany right now. So thank you again, Commissioner.
So hold on to it because I will personally pick it up.
Here it is right here. It is beautiful and it is waiting for you. So we're looking forward to that day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.